Is political correctness ruining comedy? Chances are, if you've spoken to an old white guy in the past few months, you've heard a phrase like,
She's not even 2 sentences into her stupid rant, and you can already tell that she's racist, sexist, and ageist. Old white men. That's what feminists love to rail against, is old white men, or straight white men, or old white males, or just white males.
Isn't it weird that there's a bunch of old white men sitting in a room making legislation about what I can and can't do with my body?
But so obviously, like, you as like a white male, you were like, you didn't think about like the pillaging of continent of Hawaii. Perhaps like you might be the person who is least hurt in this situation.
That is racist, sexist, biased, prejudiced, bigoted, the whole works. And that is politically correct.
Ridiculous.
so today let's talk about political correctness. What is it? And is it slashing away at our freedom of speech like a top-billed star in a terrible Friday the 13th knockoff? We'd call it Saturday the 30th, and it would take place in a European disco.
Stop before you blow a gasket. When platforms claim to be non-biased and non-partisan, turn out to be very biased and very partisan, pro-left, banning and censoring things coming from the non-left, yes, political correctness is a problem. Now, political correctness is actually not the comfort, cozy term that people might think it is. It's not even just simply overly self-righteous. It is that too, but it's malicious and it's dishonest. Because political correctness involves things like what this Megan person had said, railing about old white men. That's racist. But they don't see themselves as being racist. They only see you as racist if you don't support Barack Obama, or if you happen to be a Trump supporter, because they only believe white people can be racist. They don't believe that anyone else can be racist. Now, isn't that stupid? Anybody can be racist. So they are the worst of the lot because they are always talking about race and gender. They turn everything into a race and gender issue. That's why there is absolutely nothing said when there's a joke about Trump looking like a gorilla, but people go nuts when there is a picture of Obama resembling a gorilla or something like that.
Tech. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Political correctness is the act of choosing your words to avoid offending people. As you know, or could probably assume, the English language has a storied history of making up words to call people who aren't white guys. And for the people who those words were directed at, it really, really sucked to hear. Political correctness became
Do you really think that only the white people are guilty of that? Have you gone into every other culture in human history? Do you know every language from the old languages to modern languages? Have you listened to every word uttered on everybody's lips in all of human history? Because I am pretty sure that the Athenians and the Spartans and the Romans and whoever have called each other all kinds of derogatory nicknames. Basically what I'm saying is that kind of thing would have happened throughout all of human history, and I am pretty sure that these minorities that you talk about and you weep over so much that you claim that unpolitically correct comedy is totally grievously injuring with them with words now, I'll bet you anything that they have a lot of derogatory words for other minorities as well that they didn't get along with. Look at Sweden and Norway. They've got this rivalry that goes back a long way. I'll bet you anything that the Swedes and the Norwegians have some not so funny nicknames for each other. What about Ireland and Scotland? What about Ireland and Scotland and England? I'll bet you that there's probably some derogatory names that those countries had for each other's citizens too. So I'm not buying this. Cut your whining. I don't like those kind of sort of racially motivated nicknames, never have, never will, but I'm also not going to be so stupid and narrow-minded as to lay all of those sins at the old white man's door like you are.
A derogatory term itself in the 1980s, when old school stand-up comedians could say whatever they want and were essentially treated like rock stars for it. It was very in vogue to say racist, misogynistic, and, because it's the 80s, AIDS-phobic stuff, and you
Racist, misogynist, racist, misogynist, racist, misogynist, racist, misogynist, racist, misogynist, racist, misogynist. That's all you're going to hear from social justice warriors because they love judging people they don't like as racist and misogynist. Now, comedy doesn't have just problems with politically incorrect speech. It has problems with raunchiness. Now, I think it was probably pretty raunchy in the 80s and sacrilegious. There's certainly plenty of jokes about God, which I really don't like. And now as well. And I would imagine the raunch factor has really gone up too since the 80s. But this girl has a big hate on for the 80s apparently. And not because of anything sacrilegious and not because of anything raunchy, but she's only upset at what she claims is racist and misogynist. Well, there was probably a lot of misandrous stuff back then too. And probably a lot of stuff against white people said back then as well. She just doesn't, she's just too blind to realize it.
You'd get the laugh because you were, ooh, being naughty. My favorite example of this is Andrew Dice Clay, if only because I get to mention that he was the very first contestant fired on season 2 of Celebrity Apprentice. Leveraging political...
All right, because you're a nice little feminist, and like all good little yes women feminists, you must hate Trump with all your being. Trump is the racist devil. By all means, ignore the fact that Hillary eulogized Robert C. Byrd, who was a founder of a chapter of the Klan. Ignore Margaret Sanger's racism. Forgive Robert C. Byrd. After all, he repudiated his racism later on in life. But when it comes to Trump, throw everything and anything at the wall that you possibly can. Any little thing, no matter how insignificant, even if it's a reality TV show, and make it stick. Trump must be branded as a racist. That's feminism. That's politically correct. That is how to dishonestly win U.S. elections, people.
Incorrectness for comedy is a lot like another popular 80s relic, cocaine. Back then, everybody was doing it, but nowadays whipping that shit out at a party just seems kind of pathetic.
Newsflash, chick. Coke is still being used. It's still around. It is not an 80s relic. Drugs aren't relics. Drugs are drugs. Marijuana is still being used today. It's been around since before the 80s. Heroin is still being used. Again, around before the 80s. Now there's other drugs to add to the list. There's meth. There's ecstasy. I don't know if they are derivatives of heroin or coke, or if they're new drugs altogether. I don't know much about them. I just know that they're dangerous. Now, taking drugs isn't just simply pathetic. It's dangerous. You need to get a few priorities straight, but I think before that happens, you have to stop guzzling the Hillarade.
Using politically incorrect language is an intentionally alienating practice that reminds the people hearing it that, at the end of the day, their humanity can be boiled down to a single, horrible epithet. And that really sucks, especially when it's such a preventable behavior.
Well, why stop at just one epithet when you can go many more? For example, old, white, male, racist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. Oh, I almost forgot, straight. Because when you people talk about old white males, straight white males, you are not just stating facts about them, you are judging them for being straight white males or old white males because you think there's something wrong with that. So you are treating those words as epithets, and you are deliberately condemning people because of race, gender, and political positions that you judge them for having, which they may or may not have.
So we know what political correctness is, and we know when it became a slur itself. But the question remains, is it ruining comedy? What this argument really boils down to is your definition of free speech.
Skip the doublespeak. It doesn't matter what your definition or my definition of free speech is. The fact is, political correctness is ruining the media. It's ruining it in favor of the left-wing agendas, and it's vilifying anyone who doesn't agree with them.
Namely, that everyone has a right to it, even the people who don't agree with you. Comedy specifically thrives on being able to creatively express an opinion in a surprising or thoughtful way. Making a joke completely falls under your right to free speech, but the audience reacting to that joke falls under their right to free speech. And that doesn't mean heckling, I mean responding in a broader way, like writing a review online, or talking to you about it after the show, that kind of thing. Only assholes heckle, kids. Don't do it. The more you know. For example, let's say
Well, you obviously didn't learn that from gender studies. Now, someone had to tell this free speech business to Sony because they tried very hard to coerce people into loving their Fem Ghostbusters movie because it was all females, and they branded anyone who didn't like it as misogynist.
kids, don't do it. The more you know. For example, let's say I'm doing a stand-up show and I'm doing a bit about pasta. I hate pasta. Your linguine, I don't want to eat it because to me it tastes like the Pillsbury Doughboy is rubberized flour down my throat. That is me creatively expressing my very real opinion, which falls under my freedom of speech rights. Now, say you love linguine. You're Linguini's #1 fan, and let's face it, linguine has been the #2 noodle on everybody's list ever since that asshole spaghetti booked that gig in Lady and the Tramp. You have the right to say to me, hey, just so you know, Linguini is kind of the underdog here. Remember Lady and the Tramp? When's the last time you saw Linguini being portrayed fairly in a movie? Why you gotta add to the Linguini hate? Now that criticism is obviously negative, but that doesn't change my right to perform my pasta act. I just have to perform it, knowing that some people are going to think that way about Linguini every time I do it. But the important thing—
Seriously, your dull little lecture, which is about on par with a 5-year-old Sunday school class, has just about put me to sleep. There's criticism, then there's heckling, then there's what the media and social networks like Twitter and Facebook are doing, censoring and vilifying people they don't like that are going against the leftist mainstream social justice warrior trends.
Of audience feedback. It can be hard for creative people, especially comedians, to hear negative feedback about something they worked very, very hard on. Remember how I said in the 80s stand-ups were treated like rock stars? Yeah, nobody said no to them. This is a new thing for a lot of those old school guys. And instead of digesting criticism in the way that a comedian is supposed to—
You know, Chick, you really seem to have this big ageist thing going on. I mean, you hate old school. You hate old white men. It's just everything is about old with you and the 80s, and anything that's over, 25 years of age is nothing but pathetic and contemptible to you. I mean, your speech is just dripping with this stuff. No, these comedy acts were never treated like rock stars, and criticism was never a new thing to them. Seriously, I don't know even where you get this stuff. Like, what kind of planet have you been living on lately? Comedy acts have always gotten criticism or praise, and they've always dealt with it. And whatever has been going on to make them go off the rails is more than just simply, I didn't like your jokes. I mean, you said it yourself, people used coke in the 80s. Well, maybe drugs made people go off the rails a few times. And not just comedy acts either, but a lot of celebrities. Look at Justin Bieber now. I don't know whether he's on drugs or what drugs he might be on, but his life is a mess. And he's not a product of the 80s. He's not a comedy act from the 80s, and he's not old school. But you're not exactly railing on about him, are you?
Because remember, your job is to make the audience laugh. They're kicking up a tantrum like a toddler in the Disney store who just found out that that singing Elsa doll that they've been coveting for months is completely sold out. And they just can't let it go! Let it go! Please don't sue me, Disney. So no, political correctness is not ruining—
Oh, this is the end. I've been wounded. I'm gonna die! Oh, I've gotta get out of here. I gotta... Oh, I'm gonna die! What's worse than hearing the most horrible, most annoying song in the world? Hearing it done badly. That was the case here. Ugh, so much cringe. You are totally misrepresenting these people anyway. You're making it sound as if these old school comedians, as you call them, are blowing fits over just silly things like somebody coming up and saying, "I don't like your jokes." That's not even the case. Your social justice warriors do stuff like that. These comedians are doing this for money. So when they aren't getting the money, if their shows get canceled, for example, then they're out of a job. Oh, well, that's something to lose your crap over a little bit. It's not the same thing as a child crying over a doll. It just isn't.
Oh! Please don't sue me, Disney. So no, political correctness is not ruining comedy. It's actually making it a hell of a lot smarter. When you don't have exhausted old tropes and gimmicky, shocking punchlines to fall back on, you have to think of more creative ways to execute your primary directive as a comedian, which is to...
No, actually, there's nothing smart about politically correct comedy. There's nothing smart about politically correct anything, because politically correct has become poisonous. It has actually become racist and biased toward the left. Whereas if you're not on the left, you are painted as racist, misogynist, and all the stuff that I mentioned earlier. That is politically correct. That is not smart. It's a new trope, and it's a bad trope, which is just as bad as any of the bad old tropes. And not all the old tropes were bad.
Make the audience laugh. And as an added bonus, there could be more people to hear your material, because you're not chasing groups away with exclusionary comedy about, for example, violence against...
Ugh, another buzzword in the social justice warrior arsenal. Exclusionary comedy. And again with the violence against women. It's always violence against women, violence against women. Why don't they care about violence against humanity? Oh no, it's just women. To heck with the rest of the population. I saw what you did there too. You tried to make it sound as if your hated old school 80s comedy comedians sit around and joke about beating up women all day long. That's a lie. And as far as your exclusionary comedy goes, I'll tell you what's really exclusionary. It's the comedy where people are tossing F-bombs every second word. The comedy where people are joking about the genitalia. The kind of comedy that I switch off no matter who is doing it. Whether it's a woman or a man. Stuff that's vulgar and lewd and gross. That is exclusionary comedy because some of us don't like it. Every comedy is exclusionary to some degree. There are people who aren't going to like my kind of comedy. So my kind of comedy is exclusionary to them because they don't like it. I don't like your singing or your idea of comedy. So that's exclusionary to me. And it's my right not to like it.
Against women. Celebrity apprentice loser Andrew X. Clay. Oh, gosh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to laugh? I don't even know what the heck you just said.
Oh, gosh. And just to say it one more time to be completely crystal clear, there is nothing wrong with you performing your dusty old crap from 1986. Nobody is suppressing your...
Oh, please. Your contempt is so thick you'd cut it with a knife. First it was old white males. Then it was old school comedians. Now you're calling their stuff dusty old crap. So according to you, comedy from 1986 was done by old school white males doing exclusionary, dusty old crap comedy. So pardon me if I don't believe you when you say there's nothing wrong with it, because you obviously do think there's something wrong with it, and you wish the rest of the world would think that there was something wrong with it as well. You might as well admit it.
Right to do that. But there's a good chance that people are going to tell you that it is not funny anymore. Because that's their opinion and they're allowed to have it as much as you're allowed to get up on stage and say whatever dumb shit you're trying to say.
Yes, teacher. Is class almost over now?
Really, chick, people from the 80s have lived longer than you have, And I think they've like kind of figured this out by now. It's not the 80s comedies people are concerned about. It's what's happening now with social media giants banning people for saying supposedly the wrong things when they didn't. People are getting accused of all kinds of bad things that they're not even guilty of because of social justice warriors like you. Political correctness is not just ruining comedy, it's ruining everything else too.
Just remember that it is the comedian's job to try and make the audience laugh, and if you fail to deliver enough, after a while, there's not going to be anyone in the audience anymore.
Look, chick, they're not stupid. They don't need you telling them how to do their job, you arrogant jerk.
What do you guys think? Is political correctness ruining comedy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, you can click subscribe. I make a new one every single week. You can also follow me on social media down below. And there's another video in the bottom left-hand corner for you to check out if you want to see a new one right now. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
I already said what I meant to say about political correctness. I'm not going to repeat it again. No, I don't like your video. No, I'm not going to subscribe. No, I'm not going to check out your social media. I'm not going to check out any videos that you have in your description. I will not recommend your video to anyone else. I am not even linking back to your video in my video, smashing yours.